The challenges and the rewards of working in a small flight department. What do you need to know to make it work? From the National Business Aviation Association, this is Flight Plan. I'm Pete Combs with your trusted source for business aviation news. Flight departments, of course, come in all sizes, but you might be surprised to know that about 80% of flight departments have 2 aircraft or less, making them, by our own definition, small flight departments. And that means a very different set of challenges and rewards compared to companies with larger flight departments. For instance, David Keyes, who chairs the Small Flight Department Subcommittee of the NBAA Domestic Operations Committee, is chief pilot at Peace River Citrus Products. He's coming to us from Arcadia, Florida. Peace River flies the Citation Latitude, operated by a 2-person flight department. James Stone is Director of Aviation at AFLAC in Columbus, Georgia. AFLAC has a fleet of 2 Gulfstream G280 aircraft. And from Lawrence, Kansas, Jeff Long, whose flight department consists of a Cessna CJ4. Guys, thanks for taking some time to talk with us here on NBAA's Flight Plan. Jimmy, I want to start with you there in Columbus. From the 30,000-foot level, what are some of the challenges you face that perhaps a larger flight department doesn't?
I think sometimes there's a challenge with just resources, having enough resources to do what you need to do. We do enjoy at my company getting the resources that we need. So a lot of times it's just about asking and planning and, really looking at your strategy and making sure you're planning ahead for what you need. That's one of the things we do enjoy here is if we do need a resource of a specific kind, I usually can't get that. So it's really the onus is on me to and my team here to really plan ahead and speak up for what we need and just go from there. We work very closely with our leaders here in the company to provide what they're looking for, and we're very open and honest with what it will take to accomplish that.
I would imagine with a much more finite range of resources, planning becomes a real exercise in diplomacy, in forethought. Tell me a little bit about that.
Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, well, we approach it different, though, because we are owned by one principal. So our planning is more of conversation than it is to sit down and budget out. And I give the example: we don't have a budget. I do not have a budget. He knows the airplane costs a certain amount of money to operate, and when I need something, he either says, "Yeah, go do it." If it's a safety flight issue or a service bulletin, there's no question. He says, in fact, his directive is just get it done. What I find in my department, and I find a lot of small departments operate this way, it's a good and bad. In other words, I'm not held accountable to a budget, but yet I'm held accountable that I'm spending the money efficiently and effectively. So when it comes to resources, it's in what a small department, a single airplane, 2 pilot, there's kind of a give and take. So we can't be like Jamie to go, okay, we're going to put in the budget for a flight planning software when it's just the 2 of us. So it's more of a conversation than it is a planning process. And I hear that quite frequently on small departments that are single owner operator, a high net worth individual. It's more of a conversation than it is a budget process.
Jeff Long at the University of Kansas, how do you guys do it there?
We have been operating aircraft at the University of Kansas for many years, around 50 years. And of course, we've had an assortment of different airplanes, but I believe that the single most important thing that has allowed us to plan for a given year is that we have tracked the historical data of expenses and activity to great depth. So when I sit down to plan the next fiscal year, I'm able to look at what different customers being KU Med Center or KU Athletics, and what they did the previous year, talk to their supervision about what the new year might look like. And that historical data provides us with excellent estimates for the future year. The second item that has really helped us is we have put our newest airplane, the CJ4, which is a 2014 model, on all three programs for maintenance. So it's on the engine program, it's on a parts program, it's also on a labor program. So we know exactly what it's going to cost based on the hours that we fly the airplane. And that, again, is a process which allows us to be very good about estimating how much our expenses are going to be for the year.
Right. And I give the perfect example. We just went through, we just had a huge inspection done 3 years, and I added 8 cars to the airplane, which was about a $30,000 expenditure. Because we do want to be in a position to do international flight. We'd have all the LOAs. And so with the rollout of CPDLC, we needed to have 8 cars, and then eventually the next step would be to add the CPDLC portion of it. So I just lay out that, send an email, said this is just a heads up, we're going to incur this cost, but it prepares us for what future navigation is going to be. And if we go overseas, we're going to have to have this equipment. And he goes, okay. So that's kind of the versus, I think, and Jamie will speak to this, but a larger department where a lot of the bigger operators, okay, that would have had to been put into a budget the year before and accounted for and planned on. And ours was kind of like, well, no, it's coming up. Here's an opportunity to add the equipment.
When you're operating on such a thin line, and what I mean by that obviously is that you don't have a lot of backup aircraft, you don't have a lot of backup personnel. How does safety come into this, and how is that a different conversation than if you were in a larger flight department with more aircraft and more personnel? David?
Oh, hugely. And I think that's the biggest issue that faces small flight departments. Personally, I see it in ours. To be conscious of compromising safety versus wanting to get the mission done. And I raise the issue that we're 2 pilots in 1 airplane, and we're facing a safety decision, maybe a mission that we know is important to the company. And are we each in a position to objectively analyze the safety risk? And if there is a risk, to either mitigate it or decide to not go. I think I've been doing this for 40-something years, so I'm in a position to say no. And I've told the boss that you pay me to say no at times when I know it's not safe. I think with some of the younger managers that I've talked to that have not had the experience, they'll push that envelope because they understand the importance of the mission. And what, as an industry, how should we go about addressing that? What resources can we bring to bear to help departments like mine mitigate safety issues? I've been talking to the safety committee. We don't have a solution yet. I mean, there's a lot of ideas, but I think it's one of the biggest issues facing us. We're fortunate that we do have NetJets as an option. We buy a NetJets card every year. And there have been times when the airplane broke and we needed to substitute in a NetJets airplane. A lot of small operators don't have that option. So when the single airplane breaks, they're either canceled or or the pressure is to get it done, or the weather's down. That's kind of where I see the biggest pressure. You're below minimums, but I really need to make this meeting, and to be able to say, no, it's not going to happen. So a bigger department has the resources and has the capability. If an airplane breaks, they can substitute in another airplane, or they have a lot of the larger departments have shares in either NetJets or FlexJet or where they can bring in another airplane to accomplish the mission. They also have SOPs that say, no, this is duty rigs and weather minimums, and it's understood from top to bottom. Small departments with a high net worth owner, his motivation is he has to make money. And once again, we're fortunate that our owners owned airplanes for a long time, so he understands the challenges. That our main operating plant is at Arcadia, Florida, and it's a 3,700-foot runway. That's a challenge for us. And I basically said, if it's wet, we can't operate in and out of there. It's a VFR airport. So over the 20-some years that he's owned airplanes, he understands that. There are just days when we can't land at Arcadia. We'll have to go to Punta Gorda or some other option, or not go. But it is a challenge for small operators. Jeff certainly be a great place for him to jump in because he's a single operator for a public institution.
Thanks for the teeing that one up for me, David. I would just comment on a couple of different things with regard to the safety and our particular situation. I would say this: we have a terrific situation because we do have a supplemental lift available to us in the form of a fraction of an airplane with executive air share, which is now called air share, and they're located just 30 miles away at the downtown airport in Kansas City. And they do provide supplemental lift for us when we have multiple trips on the same day, when our aircraft needs to be in maintenance, when we've been off station and the airplane's been grounded for a maintenance issue, or when we've got we have limited personnel and we've got personal or vacation plans. We can use AirShare to step in for us. It also has helped us in this way because our customers have become aware that we can operate a little bit more aggressively as a Part 91 operator than our fractional company operating under Part 135 rules. So I think they appreciate that now because they've seen that there are some situations where we can be completely safe and yet we can go when a Part 135 operator cannot go. And then I would say this about safety. We have never been pushed by our principals. We have every latitude to make a decision that is based on the rules and on safety, and we're not questioned about it. My people know that if they make a decision that I am not going to put them in jeopardy or question their calls. We might talk about it before and after the decision is made, but I'm not going to question it, and there's not going to be any repercussion of that decision. And then finally, I would say this about safety. I think it's for most aviators that have been in the business for a long time, it's in their DNA. It certainly is for me, and that might be largely because I'm a conservative person, but I think safety is a mindset. It's like always part of the equation, whether it's what we're doing in our hangar on the ground, whether we're taxiing or when we're flying. It is just part of every single decision. And we always take a look at when we have challenging conditions, weather or a long day or a short runway, we look at the what ifs. If something happens and our trip is looked at afterwards, what's it going to appear to be? Is it going to appear that we broke a rule or that we took too many chances or that we were being cowboys? And if it is, then we are not going to do that. And I think we've communicated that well over the last 6.5 years since I've been here. And so everybody's on the same sheet of music, and it works well for us.
Sure. Jamie, take a stab at that if you would.
Sure. I think, and I'll try my best to articulate in a way that's easy to understand. But this concept Dave talks about with resources. I think the benefit to the larger organization, if you want to compare and contrast, large versus small, I think is spreading that workload out, the day-to-day overall management of the flight department and the organization and the safety management, and spreading that over a larger number of people. So, for instance, where you have an individual who's the chief pilot and one of the two pilots, like in Dave's situation, where he handles everything for the organization. So he's involved in all of those decisions, from the strategy of what they're doing and where they're going next and that kind of a thing, all the way down to the go no go decision for the flight, and shouldering all that responsibility, he and his pilot he's flying with. I think if I could use the term luxury that you might have on a larger organization, would be you spread some of those decisions and those concepts out to a larger framework. So you might have a safety officer, you might have more developed SOPs, you might even have a standardization and training captain, those kind of things, to where you're integrating safety and those safety concepts into your organization from a large scale. And so by the time that a trip, for instance, gets down to the pilot in command for a decision at the go no go point, it's probably already been filtered through some other pieces of your safety management system, whether it be your flight planning, or your from the time that your scheduler might have put that into the computer. There might be a risk assessment component to that scheduling, and then when it gets entered into, whether it's an electronic system or a manual system, there's a risk assessment process that takes place that, instead of being focused on one individual, it's spread across multiple individuals, or maybe even a larger structure, a larger framework. So I think that's kind of something that, when you talk about resources, I think that's something that benefits the larger organizations if used appropriately.
How does that conversation, or how does that thought process change when you, the flight operator, are also the C-suite? You're the guy up front, and you're the guy in the front office.
It changes a lot, and that's a unique challenge for pilots and the management within a flight department, to deal with a C-suite person or a high net worth individual who's also flying the airplane, and to be able to say, "Yeah, boss, I don't think this is a great idea. They've got severe icing where we're going. Let's bag this." The what I tell young guys, and what I've found through my experience, is you have to set the expectations up front. You have to have that conversation with the boss. So just like when I came to work for this company, I sat down and had a conversation and said, you pay me to tell you no sometimes, and it may not be convenient for you, but in the long run, if it's a safety issue that I just feel no, then I'm going to say no. And so too many small flight department managers don't have those upfront conversations. So the expectation is, well, we're always going to go. And I encourage young guys to when they get hired, or if they're get promoted, sit down and have that conversation with the C-suite to say, this is how I operate, and these are the expectations. So when it does come back around, you can say, remember that conversation we had about me saying no? This is the time. And so to encourage that conversation, I think that's one of the challenges for the small operator versus the corporate operator that has the bigger department, that has the buffer that says, that's our procedure says no, so we're just, no is no. The other option, I tell folks, is to have some kind of, write it down, put it in some kind of operation that the C-suite signs off on, so that there is an agreement, so that when an issue comes up, you can say, well, wait a minute, you agreed to this in our ops manual. We're not going to, we're not going to commit flying for 14 hours today because you agreed that whatever 10 or 12 or whatever the duty day is that you've agreed to. So those conversations are better placed in the sit-down office ahead of time, so that when the heat comes, you can point back to it.
Yeah, and Jamie, I would imagine a lot of those conversations include the word, yeah, but, because somebody's always going to want to make an exception of the rules that you've set down, exactly as David just described them.
There are those individuals that try that, and a little bit different scenario than what Dave is speaking of, and your question related to a C-suite individual being in the front end. All of us are motivated to get the job done. There's no doubt about that, and there can be a tendency for people to want to again use the, like you said, yeah, but. But at the end of the day, you have to come down to you have to be very focused on assessing risk, and you have to be able to compartmentalize the mission and separate from the desire to get it done and those types of things. You have to be able to separate that desire from the reality of what you're about to undertake. And there are times when you look at things in totality, look at the trip or the mission, so to speak, in totality, that you should not be doing it. And so when those types of situations come up, it's very important that your people are empowered to say no, that we're not going to undertake this mission or this trip, and here's why. It scored this level in our risk assessment process, or I just, in my professional opinion, it's not something we should be doing. And back to Dave's point, it's very important that those conversations be had up front with those people who you serve, to make sure that the understanding is there that the end decision is going to come down to that pilot in command. And once that decision is made, it's very important that they be supported. You don't want a culture that takes those kinds of risks and pushes the envelope too much.
Jeff, what about the pressure of being both the C-suite person and the flight deck person?
We are not in that situation where we have a C-suite person that's also operating the airplane, but I do agree with David in that it's very important to have had these conversations before, so that there is an expectation that when we do have a situation that could be a no-go situation because of weather or other conditions, then you need to fully analyze it and have that conversation. So what we try and do at KU is fully analyze the weather and the situation for what it is. If we are taking a group for an evening event and we're going to be on the ground for 3 hours, then you've got to look at if we have thunderstorm activity as an example that's going to pass through, what do we do with the airplane when that thunderstorm does come through? Is there ability there to hangar that airplane and keep it safe? Or do you take off and go somewhere else while that system passes through and then come back and pick up your passengers? And if that system remains consistent throughout the evening, are those passengers willing to spend the night and come home the next day? These are things that you just put in front of them so that they can be part of the decision.
That's Jeff Long, who's the chief pilot at the University of Kansas, speaking to us from Lawrence. Also with us from Arcadia, Florida, is Peace River Citrus chief pilot Dave Keys. He's also the chairman of the NBAA Small Flight Department Subcommittee. And from Columbus, Georgia, the head of the flight department at Aflac Incorporated, Jamie Stone. There'll be a lot more on this topic at the Small Operator Symposium at NBAA Base in Las Vegas. You can learn more about that and register at nbaa.org/2019. And that's the latest from the National Business Aviation Association. Remember, you can subscribe to all Flight Plan podcasts at Apple's iTunes website, wherever you find your favorite podcasts, or download them from nbaa.org. I'm Pete Combs. Thanks for listening to Flight Plan.